Hi, everybody. I'm Lutana Ezogu of SkillsTribe, and I'm excited today because we are hosting an amazing interview that I've been looking forward to. So a lot of the time I get questions around introversion, shyness, social anxiety. I've noticed that a lot of people mix all of these things. Like people come to me and say, oh, I'm shy when they're really introverted. Some people say they're introverts when they're really shy. And I constantly remind people that even though I work with introverts, I'm not an expert on introversion. So I'm really happy to have people who know a lot about introversion and who are experts on introversion, shyness, and social anxiety, and they'll be sharing a lot on all of these personality traits so we can understand where we fall. So Ayomide, lovely to have you here. Dena, thank you for being here. I know it's 5 a.m., probably like 5:30 your time. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to learning about the different types of introversion, what social anxiety is, and what shyness is. So please, could you introduce yourselves, starting from Ayomide, then Dena, then Kristen. Let's know a little bit about you and what you do.
All right, so Ayomide, Dr. Ayomide. I run drayomide.com. I'm a medical doctor, mental health professional, and I'm very interested in helping people deal with the support aspects of mental health and dealing with mental health issues. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Dena?
Good morning, or I guess good evening to many of you. My name is Dena Adams, and I am a life coach and a speaker and an author. And I've lived with the introversion and shyness and social anxiety most of my life. And so I love being able to share how you can actually thrive in life, even though you might be dealing with things in that area.
Awesome, Dena. Lovely to have you here.
Hi, I'm Kristen Bates. I am an entrepreneur. I'm a tech recruiter, and I work a lot in the engineering world, so I deal with a lot of introverts. And I'm also a Myers-Briggs type indicator facilitator. And obviously, I will focus and speak a lot about introverted and extroverted functions relating to that assessment today. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm so glad to have each and every one of you here. Yeah, so my first question, what does it mean to be shy? What does it mean to be introverted? What does it mean to have social anxiety? So could you break that down for us? Ayomide and then Dena. Sorry, Ayomide and then Kristen, sorry.
Okay, do you want me to go first, or Kristen could go first and then I could...
Sure, if you want. I could talk for days about this, so I'll try to just keep this really short. According to Carl Jung, a very famous psychologist, we have both an introverted side and an extroverted side. And our introverted function, or our introverted side, helps us relate to ourselves and helps us to process different aspects of life and our experiences. And our extroverted function relates to our relationship to the outside world, our work in the world, our relationship to others outside of ourselves. And even the most introverted people have an extroverted side. My husband, who is a 30 on the introvert scale, that's as introverted as you can get, also has an extroverted function. So that's how I like to define introversion.
Okay. All right, you want me to take over from
agree
there?
with you. Notice that people, like, we all have, have extroversion.
And do you want me to speak to the social anxiety part too, or just the introversion part? The social anxiety, yeah, I have a lot of experience with that personally and inside my work with people. And I feel that oftentimes when people are feeling social anxiety, they're not feeling as expressed in their extroverted side or their extroverted function. So I do spend a lot of time figuring out what those strengths are and helping people to feel more expressed or comfortable in that. And I find social anxiety often will come up when we are in situations that are in direct conflict with our introverted functions or our preferences, if you will, in those areas.
Yeah.
So, Kristen, could you shed some light when you say it comes up in the last part of what you said? Could you explain a little bit more?
When we are in situations that are not, let's say, aligned with our preferences. So you probably help people a lot with their networking. And for some functions or some types, networking, which I would classify as extroverted sensing, so that's an extroverted function, is very low down in some types' priority or preference. So they feel even more uncomfortable in some situations like that, whereas some types, they thrive in networking situations because it's something that they're more accustomed to or naturally are more have aptitude for, I guess. Is that helpful?
That makes a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense. Even when I teach people, I always tell them start from an environment that you're comfortable in, and then like gradually put yourself out there. So I completely agree with you, and yeah, I understand what you're saying.
And some people, we shared this last time we talked, some introverts are very confused because they say, oh, I really like being on stage or I like doing public speaking, but I feel very nervous or uncomfortable at networking events. And what I'll share with you is oftentimes people with introverted functions, they do really like speaking in front of people because it's more efficient to address a large group rather than one-on-one. One-on-one networking for someone with an introverted preference is very draining. Extroverted people love connecting one-on-one. So sometimes when you put them on a stage, they get very nervous and have a lot of anxiety because they feel so overwhelmed trying to connect with every single person in the audience, rather than an introvert who feels comfortable sometimes in those environments. It can be a little bit confusing. So I do like to myth bust that introverts are shy. I don't think that's fair at all. The opposite for me in some cases. Extroverts are very shy, I find. So, yeah.
Okay. I am here. I'd love to hear from you.
Well, so I like to think of them as kind of two different axes. So like there's the introversion, extroversion axis, and then there's the shyness, outgoing axis. And people think they're the same axis, but they're actually two different axes, and you can be on any point on each of them. Yeah. So it's kind of like saying someone is like talking about where someone lives in the world and maybe how much money they have. Like the two don't necessarily go together. So you can have rich people anywhere, and you can have people who are not rich anywhere. So basically, like Kristin said, introverts can be outgoing or shy, and extroverts can be outgoing or shy. So it's not like shyness is a thing that belongs to introverts, because shyness has more to do with how you feel about and obviously shyness is related more to social anxiety. It has more to do with how you feel in terms of your confidence in dealing with social situations, and your sense of how you're perceived in social situations. So it's a combination of those two things, and of course that can be affected by your upbringing, your experiences growing up, your recent experiences, and just your self-image and all of that. And introversion, extroversion, on the other hand, is more of a personality trait. So it's a complete. So for instance, I used to be shy, and I'm not as shy as I used to be. And that's something that changed with time. But my introvertedness has always been there, and that hasn't changed. My expression of it has changed as my shyness has been dealt with, but introversion itself is still pretty much there. So yes, extroverts can be shy, which means it could be someone who really wants to connect with people and really wants to relate with people and really gets a lot of energy from connecting people, but they're just afraid to do it because their self-image is poor or is bad. And an introvert might not be connecting with people because they don't feel like, and if they want to speak their mind, they will. So it's and of course many people are kind of in between, like ambiverts. Like I was explaining to Lutana earlier on. So if you think of it as kind of a range, it's not like there are people who are 100% introverts and like 100% extroverts. There are people like that, but they're actually quite few. So most people are, if a way to think of it is 70-30 or 30-70, 60-40, and some people are 50-50. And it's kind of like a bell curve. So most people are kind of actually a combination of both in varying degrees, but then they express that also in varying degrees. And so you have like just the whole, at the end of the day, everyone is like really different because everyone's percentage is different. And then everyone's expression of their percentage is also different. So, but yes, shyness has more to do with social anxiety. And social anxiety, if it becomes impairing enough, can become social anxiety disorder, which then becomes like a mental health issue, as against social anxiety, which everyone has to some degree in different situations, especially public speaking, which is said that people fear more than dying. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Ayomide, thank you very much for that. So if I'm understanding you correctly, introversion personality trait, shyness is an emotional problem, and then social anxiety is a mental health issue.
Well, social
and then
anxiety,
for introversion and extroversion,
social anxiety is a normal thing to some degree.
Okay.
Because anxiety is a normal response. Anxiety is a normal response that we have. So I'm trying to separate social anxiety from social anxiety problems and then social anxiety disorder. So social anxiety disorder is a mental health issue. But social anxiety problems is when we have more social anxiety than we should have, but it doesn't necessarily mean mental illness. It might just be like, an emotional problem that, we can deal with in different ways. And then social anxiety is, everyone is going to have every one of us has social anxiety in certain situations. Maybe you are facing an exam and you have to present orally. If you're not socially anxious, you probably don't care about that exam in that setting. But that's a normal level of anxiety for that social setting, as against it becomes a problem when it's a general social anxiety in all social situations, or in social situations where you shouldn't be expected to be anxious. Then we're having a social anxiety problem. And then you have a social anxiety so that when that problem becomes impairing enough to be messing with someone's life in very serious ways.
This makes a lot of sense to me because I didn't even know that like social anxiety was different from social anxiety disorder. So this is like new news to me because I've come across people who say that they were physically incapable of moving. That's when you said like, when it starts to mess with your life.
Yes, at that point it's becoming problematic.
That's
like it's not just butterflies.
So it's really interesting. So it makes a lot of sense that each of us will feel a degree of social depending on how comfortable we are with the situation versus it's actually being like that serious so this makes a lot of sense. It's cleared up a lot for me personally, so thank you very much. So what are the similarities and differences between introversion, shyness, and then like social anxiety?
Well, they look the same. I think that's the problem. They can lead to the same behavior, which is less. So all of them can lead to less engagement, less social engagement. And people just therefore assume that, because this behavior is common to all three. And it's not necessarily common to all three, but you're likely to see it. So you're likely to see less social anxiety, engagement in people who are shy or socially anxious or introverted. But they're for different reasons. And like I said, I could be engaging less socially because I just don't want to. And that's fine. Like, it's my choice. I don't have to, and I don't, and I don't. And then, and if that's a problem, it's your problem. It's not my problem, right? But then, if I want to and I can't, then I have a problem. And I think that's where people kind of make the mistake of confusing both. So the real question is, someone is not engaging socially. The question is, how much do they want to? How much do they feel a dissonance between their level of engagement and their desire to engage? Because if they're engaging at the level that they want to, if you don't think that's a lot, that's your problem. That's not their problem. They're quite happy.
And I always share too that an introvert will think or feel first and then talk, whereas an extrovert will talk first and then feel or think. And so sometimes when somebody isn't speaking, we assume that they're shy or anxious or something when they're just processing a bit differently than us. So thanks for sharing that. That is so powerful. Thank you. It's a good reminder too.
That thing when you said it, where you said, if I want to but I can't, that's when it's a problem, versus I don't really want to. Because sometimes, even though I teach people to network, sometimes I go out and I really do not feel like socializing, and that's okay. Like you said, that's your problem. Like, you cannot tell me how much or how little socialize. I decide how much I want to socialize. Like, if I want to connect with 4 people, that's okay. If I want to connect with 10 people, you know.
It's frozen. Uh-oh.
Yeah. So are there levels to these personality types, right? And I think I've sort of asked this before, because I think you've sort of answered this, because you say that there's a sort of a curve. Everybody has a bit of introversion, everybody has a bit of extroversion in them, to varying degrees depending on the person. And then for some people, like how you explained about social anxiety and social anxiety disorder, you know, like when it gets to the point where it's very serious, then that's a disorder where it actually starts to mess with your life. So I think we've kind of answered this question already, because I'm trying to pick what my audience sent to me and then answer that too. So for Kristin, what are the different types of introversion? Like, I'm not even clear on this. I know I'm an introvert. So I would love to know what the different types of introversion, like what are the different types, and then how do we know where we fall?
Yeah, definitely. What I use with the Myers-Briggs typology is what's called functional stack. So what that means is it takes your cognitive functions and it rates them from 1 to 8 in terms of how comfortable you are in that function. And so that's how I will categorize what type, if you will, of introversion somebody has. And if you know your Myers-Briggs type, that's the easiest way to figure that out. But basically, there are 4 types of extroverted functions and 4 types of introversion. And the 4 types of introversion are introverted feeling, introverted thinking, introverted sensing, and introverted intuiting. So again, we are whole in our personality, and we do have all of those different types of introversion, but there's going to be one that we're more, or 2 that we're more familiar or comfortable with. So for me, I am an extroverted intuiting with introverted feelings. I'm an ENFP in Myers-Briggs. So that's how that breaks down. So as an introverted feeler, when I'm making decisions, I relate to how I feel about it. And for me to make really strong decisions, I have to spend time with myself, get really quiet, and really, really feel into what I'm doing and how that aligns to my values. How's that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So for this type of introversion, you feel it's based on like your feeling. I wouldn't treat somebody this way because if somebody treated me this way, I wouldn't feel great. So this is the type of introversion that's based a lot on feelings, right?
That's right. That's my level. That's my type of introversion. My husband is an introverted intuiting and an extroverted thinker. He's an electrical engineer, so it's a perfect job for him because people with introverted intuition are very attuned to how their gut feel is about things. They don't have to necessarily see something to know that it's real or true, which is great for somebody that works with electricity, because you can't see electricity. You have to rely on your intuition a lot to work with it and know where it is at all times and to stay safe. Yeah. And my accountant, thank goodness, is an introverted sensor.
So for the
introverted sensing likes to put together facts and figures, and they're very grounded in what's happening right in the moment. Yeah. Anyways, again, I could talk for hours about this, so I want to make sure everyone gets a chance.
This makes a lot of sense because I feel like if you know the kind of introvert you are, it will help you figure out what kind of work you should even be doing, right?
Well, actually,
like how you explained with your husband and electricity, and then your accountant and facts and figures. But could you please go over the 4 types of introversion again? So there's feeling. Yeah. Okay.
There's introverted feeling, and an introverted feeler is somebody that's going to make decisions based on how they're feeling, and they're going to relate a lot of the world to their values. And then there's introverted sensing, which is gathering facts and figures and correlating past details of events to come up with the answers to things. And there's introverted thinking, which is that introverted type is really good at coming up with processes and figuring out how things should go and how they should run. And then there's introverted intuiting, which is a type of introversion that is focusing on more abstract things, and they're very good at recognizing patterns. And they, again, are going to rely on gut feel. They're also highly creative, introverted function. Yeah. And just to touch on your last point too, when people are trying to figure out their work in the world, I actually focus on their extroverted function because that helps me to understand who they are outside of themselves. But yes, of course, I'll relate it to their introverted function because a lot of the time that's how they're making their decisions in some cases. Yeah.
Okay, so if I wanted to find out what kind of introvert I am, because I'm listening and I feel like, okay, feeling sort of applies to me. And then the processes, the thinking part also applies to me a lot. So if I wanted to find out like if I'm a feeling or thinking kind of introvert, how would I go about doing that?
The best way to do that is to figure out what your Myers-Briggs type is, and then it will break down your stack. So it will show that you have all of the types that I just talked about, but in what order? In what order do you use those functions, and in what ways? So that's what I would do. Once you know your type, you can Google it. If people are listening, they're more than welcome to just email my team, and we'll break down for you what your type of introvert is and what your type of extroversion is too. And there's just a ton of resources available online. This is the Carl Jung was around in the 1800s as he was coming up with all of these different theories on cognitive psychology and function. So there's just a ton of info out there if you know your Myers-Briggs type, which is easy to figure out too.
Fantastic. So what I'll do is I'll put a link below this video, a link that will help us figure out the Myers-Briggs, a link to the Myers-Briggs, and then a link to your team. So I'll put like your team email or a way that people can contact you.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you
fine.
so much, Kristen.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so what was the next question? Yes, I'm really like this question. Yeah. Is it possible to be conditioned to become an introvert or to become shy? Like these personality traits that we've talked about, right? Is it possible to be conditioned to have one of them?
Like, are you talking about like nature versus nurture type of thing?
Exactly.
So I'll just speak very briefly on this. Again, I'll use the Myers-Briggs framework that you're born with a dominant function and the rest of your cognitive functions fall into place to support this dominant function. And usually by the age of 24 or 25, you can get a good reading on somebody's personality type, if you will. And so some of us are born with a function, but it doesn't figure out if it's introverted or extroverted, oftentimes until your mid-20s, is from what I've learned.
Okay, awesome. Ayomide, could you help us? I love your answer, by the way.
This thing is quite smart. He realized I was muted and said, you might want to unmute now.
Oh, wow.
Google is listening. All right. Yeah, I mean, like Kristin said, it's personality is very much an adult thing. One of the things I was saying to Lutana earlier on was that we can't even have a personality disorder in kids, because the idea is that they don't even have personalities. Like, they're still developing their personalities. So you can't even say, you can say kids have conduct disorders. That's as far as, you know, you go in terms of mental health issues, but you don't say a child has a personality disorder. You have to be at least an adult to have a personality disorder, because that's how long it takes for your personality to kind of be fully shaped. So clearly, stuff that happens to you during that shaping period, which is your entire, you know, pre-adult life, like we're talking like pre-20s, and that's a lot of stuff, because that's a lot of years. So yes, a lot of shaping can and will happen in that time. That said, I mean, like I said earlier, because shyness is more shapeable than introversion, extroversion. So the way I like to explain it is that introversion and extroversion is going to be, the expression of it can be shaped, but the core of it is fairly stable throughout life, but it can express differently as you get to know yourself better, as you get to understand how to relate to yourself and relate to the world, and you know, kind of understand all of the uniquenesses of yourself. Then you're able to express it in ways that, so for instance, you have introverts that people are more introverted, but people think they're extroverted because they always see them kind of switching on their extroverted side. But that's just an expression. The reality is that they're done with that, and then they go home, and then they need to recharge. But nobody sees that, and everybody thinks, oh, this person is so extroverted, you know, and they're always inviting them to parties, and I'm like, nope. I've had enough parties for the week or for the month or something, you know. So I think shyness is, I think in terms of changeability, or in terms of conditioning, I think shyness is the most prone. It's fairly easy for someone to become shy, especially depending on the kind of childhoods that they have. But it's also, I wouldn't say it's easy. It's obviously it's never as easy to kind of walk around shyness, but it's definitely doable. Introversion, extroversion is more of kind of changing the expression. So a good analogy for that, considering that superheroes are a very big deal now, is it's like you have a superpower, but then you have to figure out how to use your superpower, and that's going to change over the course of your superhero career. But the power itself is pretty much the same. But how you learn to use it, and how you learn to work with other people and their powers, is going to change as you work with different people and you're in different situations, and you yourself are growing and maturing. And of course, a lot of that also has to do with how much information you get in terms of, you know, learning things like your personality type, learning things like what that means, knowing other people. A big part, I think one major thing that helps a lot is knowing people like yourself and realizing, oh, that's the way I can be that I didn't know I could be. And I mean, you're not necessarily going to copy them, but it gives you ideas that you may not even have had, like, or you realize, oh, so someone like me can be something like this. And then that gives you new ways of, so models are a really important part of this, definitely.
I love that so much. I love it so much because two things you mentioned that like stuck with me, right? It's how my friends don't believe that I'm introverted because I'm the plug. Like I'm the person who, if you want to do something on Thursday, I call her up and she'll tell you what to do, all the fun stuff that's happening. I usually go out on the weekends. People don't realize is I take Sundays off. I literally just like I'm home in my PJs, sleeping, resting. Dana and I had a conversation about this earlier. Like I Sundays are just my rest days, they're my chill days. If I don't have those days, I will just like I'll be overwhelmed and I'll be burnt out. So people don't see that side. People just see me like, oh, socializing, and they say, she's not like she always says she's an introvert, but she's not an introvert. So I love that. The other thing that stuck with me was saying when you were like, one thing that helps being other people who are like you that have done stuff, right? So that's even one of the reasons why I do what I do, to just show people that you can be an introvert, doesn't mean being an introvert is not a bad word. Introverts are not failed extroverts, and because of this, because of what you said, I've been thinking of even having people who are introverts who have done a lot to come on when you're talking about models to say, oh, this is somebody that's like me that has done this, so you've just sort of validated this thing I've been thinking about. Yeah. So thank you so much for that, Ayomide. For Dena, I want to know, because I know Dena, we talked earlier and she mentioned how she sort of was conditioned to be an introvert. And I know that she mentioned earlier how she had dealt with OD, what the tuning. I also have a similar story because I tell people I was the very, very bold and outspoken child because I used to spend I spent a lot of time with my dad. My dad is extroverted to the extreme, and he would always tell me like, speak up, So it's I get what you're saying, but if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that it is conditioned, but that shyness is the one that's like easier to happen, like to be conditioned to be shy or not shy. It's easier than the other two. So Dana, I would love to hear from you. What was your experience like being sort of conditioned to become introverted, shy, all of that, and what was your experience?
So for me, when I was younger, I was very outspoken and I loved people. I could just go up and talk to anybody. But I loved hearing whatever they had to say. And so
I'm not sure
one of the issues that can you hear me?
Hear Dena. I don't know if you can hear.
Yeah, I can't hear her too.
You can't hear Dena.
No?
Yeah.
Kristin,
I
you're
can
on
hear her just fine. Dana, you sound great over here, so that's weird.
Oh. Because I can see her speaking, but I couldn't hear anything, so
Okay.
I wasn't sure.
I see what. Yeah,
I have a green bar giving me volume.
Yeah, I just.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just put up the volume.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, so
I can hear
me now?
Yes, great, perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So for me, growing up, like when I was really young, probably like, I don't know, probably before I was 8 years old, I loved going up and talking to people. It didn't matter where we were. If we knew people, I would go talk to them. It didn't matter what was going on around me. I loved just interacting with people. I loved performing. I was in dance classes and loved being on stage. And I just loved all of that. But because of the family that I grew up in, and the social status that they had, I was taught at a very young age, probably between the ages of 5 and 8, it started becoming a big issue where you don't interrupt people when they're talking. You don't make waves. So you have to be very careful what you say, not to offend anybody else. When we would be out at like a big event and everybody around, you had to be so careful what you said, how you acted, everything, because it reflected on the family, that it actually made me become very introverted. I wasn't shy. I didn't, and that's where the anxiety started developing, because I didn't know how any longer. Let me rephrase that. I wasn't able to develop the skills for social activity. I knew how to go sit in a corner and not be heard, not be seen, because I didn't want to be a problem. And so when people were telling me not to do all these things, it was my perspective of what that meant that made me change, because I thought it meant I was a problem. I thought it meant I didn't know how to speak to people. I thought it meant I was doing things wrong. So now as an adult going into social situations, and actually I shouldn't even say as an adult, as I got into middle school, it started becoming a debilitating issue for me, where I didn't know how to interact with people. I didn't know how to develop, I didn't have the skills that I needed, because although it came naturally to me when I was younger, I was conditioned to be different. I was conditioned to be a certain way. I was conditioned to change. And so one of the things that happened to me as I went into middle school and high school is I was so inside myself, I didn't know how to be me any longer. And so that debilitated me in itself, and it threw me into, by the time I was 8, I was diagnosed with clinical depression, like massive. And by the time I was in high school, I was suicidal. I had massive anxiety. The depression was so intense. And so it was interesting to hear you say that our personalities aren't developed until we're adults, because it was through my middle school and high school years that personality was my biggest challenge. But I think the problem was I didn't know I had the option to choose. I didn't know that I could go internal and figure out who I was. I didn't know I could choose, like, okay, well, this was because someone told me this, so I really don't have to be that way. And this is because this is how they did it, but I don't really have to do that. That doesn't feel right to me. That's not who I am. And so it wasn't until I was an adult and had 5 kids and was married, and it wasn't the life that I wanted, did I realize that I am screaming on the inside. I just want out, because I don't know how to interact in social life. I don't know how to interact at home. I don't know how to be anything, because everything growing up, we're told, don't talk to strangers, don't offend people, don't interrupt people when they're talking, don't do all these things, but they don't tell you what you do. How do you interact? Instead of telling me not to, they could have taught me how to. And so that was the big piece for me, that for me before today, like I really felt like I was conditioned to be an introverted person because I wasn't shy. And I didn't have the anxiety until later on, that how I was taught to be created the anxiety for myself. The shyness that I did end up having was because of being bullied. It wasn't because of introversion, extroversion, or anxiety. It was a direct relation to being bullied at school, with my sister's friends, and what that environment created. And so for me, it created this issue where I love being an entrepreneur. I love being on stage. I love performing. However, the fear of what other people thought of me kept me from doing that, and would throw me into full-on panic attacks if I had to be in front of people, if I had to do a presentation in class. So it literally debilitated me during my middle and high school years, where I couldn't function. And because I was in fight or flight mode all the time, it shut down that part of my brain to where I could actually retain information. So school was a struggle, not because I couldn't understand, but because I couldn't retain, because I was always in that fight or flight mode from the stress and the anxiety of being around people every day, all day long in a school setting, and not knowing how to interact. So now, for the last 16 years, and I've worked with therapists and counselors and everything. I did that for many years, but there was a piece that I couldn't get to, probably because I wasn't going to the right ones. And there's good and bad in every profession, or there's very talented and not so, because I think of, we all have our experiences and we learn as we grow. But I really had to go on this journey for myself of going internal and discovering inside of me what is really me, and what was because what I call like the contamination of the world that was put on me. And I need to start peeling back those layers like an onion. I just got to start peeling them off. That's not me. That was not me. I was taught to be this way. I was conditioned to be this way. This came from here. so that I could really get down to the core of who I was created to be. Who was I when I was born, and how can I get rid of everything that everybody taught me so I could figure out who I am, and then decide, okay, was this helpful to me to grow this part of myself? Can I, because just because I was taught it doesn't mean it was bad. It just doesn't work for my personality. It doesn't work for who I am. It doesn't work for the core of where I come from. And so what was really hard about that is I had to start changing myself, even though I had this entire environment around me that wasn't changing with me. And so my family sees me as an introvert, big time. But other people see me as an extrovert because they see me in that environment. You put me on a stage, you get me in a group of people that I can, share my experiences from and I can learn from. I am full on engaged 100%. But you get me at home in a family environment where I'm around that type of setting where I was always conditioned to not be anything, to be seen and not heard, so to speak. It's still sometimes a struggle of how to interact with all the personalities in my household and be respectful of them, but also honor myself. So it's been quite a journey and a challenge, and I'm learning so much here today. So this is amazing because my husband's an electrician. He's an engineer mindset. Our daughter is very much put me on a stage. I will do all that, but you make me stand in front of people and speak. She has a full-blown anxiety attack. And then there's, my husband's very much that thinker, like you were talking about, my husband's very much that thinker. And so I'm like, can we have a conversation, please? Like, talk to me. And he's like, I got to process. I'm like, I can't do that. So I'm really excited to actually take this test because I am not a mental health professional. I am not, but this has just been my experience and how I live through this because to me, I'm a conditioned introvert. That's how I'm an extrovert conditioned to be introverted. I have shy pieces because of things that happened, but I also face and learn to live with anxiety as well as, that whole mental health piece. And it's something, the suicide piece and the depression and everything was stuff I've battled for years. It's not something I just was able to get through. It's something I have to work at every day. And so being able to learn, first of all, that there's this whole scale in there makes me feel so much better. Because I think for a lot of people, we don't know ourselves. We don't really know who we are because we're always looking at everybody else in the world, because we don't know how to go internal, because we don't have people teaching us how to focus on ourselves, because we're taught growing up that's selfish. You always do for everybody else. And a lot of times that comes into play with our faith or lack of, or whatever our beliefs are. And so I am very strong in my faith, and that drives my choices. But other people around me were very different in their faith. And so they would put the brakes on, say, no, you can't do that. No, don't do that. No, don't do that. And so I was always really confused within me of who I was, and believed that I was a problem because of everybody else and what they were saying and my perspective of how I received it, which in turn conditioned who I became. And now I'm able to, over the last 16 years, decide who I really want to be. But at the same time, as you talk about that cognitive piece, I think something that's super important for people to realize as well is, like, I have a niece who has Asperger's. We have many different levels of different types of cognitive behaviors in our family. And so as you're talking, I'm thinking, that person, this makes so much sense, because we just see people when they're not like us as a problem. A lot of us will see people as, oh, well, we can't interact with them because they don't do these things. They don't know how. Instead of learning where they are and learning how they are and how they interact and what their strengths are in that space, and meet them where they are, we try to go to them from where we are and make them be like us. And that's what happened to me, was people didn't know how to handle me, because I was like, okay, I love everybody. I'm going to talk to everybody. If you're going to say there's a problem, I want to talk about it. I want to fix it. I want to overcome it. And I want to keep going with life. I don't want to be held back. But that's everything that my family was stop, stop, stop. And it just made me, it just built all this stuff up inside of me that I didn't know how to get out, which I think in turn created a lot of the problems that I ended up having to face.
Dena, thank you so much for sharing. I'm very curious to know what Kristen and Ayomide think about what you said, but I can relate. I can relate totally, because for me, there are so many things you said that I connected with. For me, it was going to private uni here, and I've told Ayomide this so many times. There was a time I wrote newsletter about this, and I got so many responses from people who had the same experience. Right? It's just what you said about people just saying, this is how I am and this is how I want the world to be, and I expect everybody to be like this, you know? There's a meme I saw on Instagram the other day where the person said, I don't ask you why you're so loud. Like, stop asking me why I'm so quiet, you know? So it's the same thing. For me, like going to private uni here, it was the worst experience ever. And I tell people this, and I know, yes, people have gone to private university and they didn't have, it was good for them. But for me, it was a horrible experience, because like you said, it was constantly like, no, 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 you can't do this, you can't do that. And it had to take me completely removing myself from that environment and going to a completely new environment where like nobody knew me. There was nobody telling me like, do this, don't do that, for me to actually figure out who I was. So I feel like, first of all, it's like getting yourself out of that environment. How you said you had to go deeper and figure out who you were, figuring out who you are, and then deciding, is this how I want to be? Like, do I want to be more social? If I want to be more social, how do I do that? If I want to be less social, how do I do that? If I want to remain the same, then I'll remain the same. So I completely resonate with a lot of stuff, and I relate to a lot of stuff that you said today. And I'm curious, I know Dena, Kristen wanted to say something, because I think I saw her like mute button go off. And Ayomide, I'll love to hear what you guys think.
I didn't have anything to say. I was just happy. I was just like, yay, everything you were saying. It was just, it was so great. Thank you for sharing that. Self-knowledge is such a gift. And that's really cool that you're encouraging that with your work and everything. It's incredible. Thank you for sharing that story with us.
Well, of course. Yeah. I think it's so important to be able to share what we go through so we can relate to other people, so people know they're not alone in everything. Because a lot of times I feel like we think we're the only person in the world that feels like this. And in actuality, there's probably more people that don't know why they aren't like this than, you know.
And I do believe that we do live, quote unquote, in an extrovert's world. We are communal by nature as humans, so we do rely on others, and we can't just self-sustain. And so if you do have introverted preferences, you're already now forced to be outside of your comfort zone. And I think it's important to recognize just, you know, how common that is. So that's really cool.
And I think it's important too that, you know, I just spoke at an event on suicide prevention and awareness. And I think what's so important too these days is to help people know that mental health professionals are a safe place. Like, that is so important, because so many people don't get help when they're struggling, because then they feel stigmatized. And if this is this way, then what are people going to think of me? And how are people going to see me? When in all actuality, we should be raising our children to think, how do I see me? What do I think of me? And how do I want to be? And if I need help, I go get help. Because even in a village, like in a community, you have to have everybody's strengths to make it work. You know, the statement, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, I think it takes a village to help us all thrive, because we all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses, and we all have a part to play in each other's lives to help us all be better and to make it successful. It's no different than in a household. It takes everyone in the home doing their part and being respectful of each other and their space, and finding a harmony within it, not a balance, because I feel like balance makes it, when you get things balanced, you're done. You're stopped. There's nothing else to do. I like to tell people, like, you need a flow. You need the harmony so things can flow within and through and the people around, kind of like me and my husband. When we get in sync, we can finish each other's sentences. We can know what the other person's getting ready to do. We can, someone starts, someone ends, and it flows really well. And if you can create that within your home, because everybody knows who each other are, who they're striving to be, what their vision is, where they're going, that allows us to thrive in that environment. I think it's so important to have that and to be able to incorporate that into schools and into, you know, everything in work, because if everyone's working for the same vision and you can discover everybody's strengths and weaknesses, as we call them, as a, you know, or find where everyone thrives and where they don't, so you can help develop those other skills, then everything flows better. You have a better potential of reaching the goals that you want to reach. And the cognitive piece is still like eating at me, as you guys were talking about the cognitive piece, because I suffered brain trauma 2 years ago in a car wreck, and I had to really learn how to communicate all over again. I had to learn how to form sentences, how to get my thoughts right in my head so I can get them out of my mouth. And even still today, like, there are times, especially when I get tired, I can't form a sentence that makes any sense because my brain is just done. But what I've learned through that process is, although the brain trauma testing said my cognitive skills are great, which they actually improved. There's things I can do now that I couldn't do before, but there are things that I could do before that I can no longer do. I was an accountant. I can't do that anymore. My cognitive function has changed. And so I am learning all of this all over again and developing that personality and figuring out this introvert extrovert piece. And it's actually taken me to another place of this self-discovery that I've been on for so long. It's like doing it all over again because I don't know who I am now, or I don't know how I function in these areas, or how do I want this to happen. But I think if we could teach our children that you get a choice to choose who you are regardless of what other people are saying, and get them to focus on themselves, it would actually create a better learning environment, because they would be, everyone would be focused on how do we grow our best, and now how do I serve them where they are. And if we could teach that in business, in life, in generalizations, I think it would actually help us with developing our personalities more naturally, instead of feeling it to be so forced on us by the outside forces.
Ayomide, do you have anything to say or add? Dena, thank you so much for so much.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, she was asking if you had anything to say.
Okay, because I didn't hear my name, but I felt like you were referring to me.
Yeah.
Well, I don't really have much. That's, your story is very inspiring.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, you've had to deal with so much. You've had to come through so much. You've had to pretty much almost rewrite yourself, so to speak.
Yeah.
And here you are. And that's really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just it's great. It's great to hear that you've been through all of that and you've come out on the other side, and you're helping people to know that that's also possible. So that's really great.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that.
I have a question that came up from all of this, right? And the question is, and I know we're like almost running out of time, but quick one. For Dena and myself, I feel like we were able to get out of the environment. So for her, it was being able to like sort of rewrite her. It was sort of a positive of the accident. having to completely leave that environment and go to an environment where I was now deciding who I was and what I wanted to be and what I liked or didn't like. For somebody who is in an environment where there are people telling you don't, right? How do you have any tips? Does anybody have any tips for how that person can, I don't know, like decide who they want to be, still being in that environment? Because like, honestly, for me, if I hadn't left that particular environment, I feel like I've been in a situation where I had zero social skills, because I had zero social skills when I left it and I had to learn again, but I had the freedom sort of to learn to be social and to network, right? Who is not able to get out of that environment? Do we have any sort of tips for the person?
For someone who can't leave their environment, you said?
Yeah, the environment that is conditioning them to be, yeah.
Well, one of the things Dena mentioned, which is really super key, is getting help. And the truth is, leaving the environment may not actually even be enough, depending on, because sometimes you carry the environment with you in your head. So for me, I dealt with shyness, for instance, and I remember I had this all my life. I'd been shy in, primary school, I was shy in secondary school. I go into university, and I go into university, and it was a fairly new set of people. Like, it was people who didn't know me before. But then I realized that, so I dealt with, part of my shyness related to sort of low-level bullying, right? And I realized that I was kind of still being low-level bullied in university by people who didn't know me. And I think that was the first time it clicked on for me that there's something in me, because these people don't know me. Why are they treating me differently? Why do they? So I realized that there must be something in me that they're responding to, that I'm carrying with me everywhere I go. Because this was me and a bunch of other people, and then they single me out and they treat me the same way people were treating me back in secondary school. And it's not like they knew what those people, like, do you get what I mean? So I think that was the first time light bulb really went on for me, like, okay, I need to do something about myself here. And there's something in me that these people are responding to, and I need to figure out what that is and change it. And it took me a while. And I think that's where getting, so yes, there's a level to which obviously, so like, for instance, you didn't need help, Dena needed to get help. And sometimes people make that mistake of thinking, oh, it's the stronger person doesn't, like, no, everyone is different. If you have a bruise, you don't need help. If you have a fracture, you definitely need help. But then with the mind, it's hard to know which a bruise from a fracture. And you don't say to someone with a fracture, oh, you're weak, you had to go to a hospital. I stayed at home with my bruise, and I got, I became fine on my own. I just put a bit of plaster, and I was like, no one does that, right?
Yeah.
So getting help is a big part of, and I think one mistake people often make is they think, oh, if I go and get help, I'm going to be given all of these things. I'm going to have a label placed on me. And the truth is, sometimes you actually go for help, and you're like, you get told, you actually don't need, you just need, like, your problem is not really, it might be bad enough that you actually even need medication. That's what I'm saying. But it might just also be on a level where therapy is enough, or you might need therapy and medication, or you might not even need therapy. Like, you might just need one, like, some people just get one session of therapy, and that's they just need to know something that they didn't know, and that's what they need to kind of make the shift. So everyone is different, really. That's what I'm saying. And even if you can't leave your environment, because it's not always possible to leave your environment for many reasons. Even if you can't leave your environment, if you can get help, that itself goes a long way. And sometimes leaving your environment without getting help, you may actually just be carrying your environment with you without realizing it. So yeah, definitely speak.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ayomide, for that. So we've established that have any of these traits, right? You can still live a full life. Like Dena as an example, like Ayomide is an example. We're all examples of that, right? My question now, my last question for each and every one of you is, what would you say to somebody who has, what is like advice you'd give to somebody who has these kind of, any of these, whether it's like introversion or social anxiety, you give to that? Just like one or two, things that you'd say to them that would help them live like a full life, that will help them thrive. So for example, for me, I would say what Ayomide said. I would say find people who are like you, who have learned to thrive, and like learn from them. Like that's one easy way that I would say you can do that. Yeah.
I would say inside my work, I like to help people establish what I call their comfort zone. And so often you hear about people encouraging people to get out of their comfort zone, and life begins outside your comfort zone. And that's not my philosophy at all. I believe that once you figure out exactly what your baseline is and where your strengths are and where you feel most comfortable, that's when you can really grow as a person. You can recognize, whoa, I'm out of my comfort zone right now. And is this good? Is it healthy? Am I growing? But also being able to go to your comfort zone to recharge and to have enjoyment and to find pleasure. And again, that just comes from a lot of self-knowledge. So yes, finding other people like you to learn. So through mentorship, and also there's a lot of resources out there for us to learn about ourselves. And yeah, that would be my answer.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah.
So I have 2 tips for people, and this is what I did. And I loved how Kristen talked about not believing that you have to get outside your comfort zone to grow, because that's where I've been pushed to grow. But for me, what has helped me the most is, one, I had to grasp the concept that I had to be willing to stand alone in my growth, because there were people around me that didn't understand. I didn't have a support system yet. So I had to do it on my own first. I had to go on YouTube and read books and start creating this support system around me of people that did not know me because they had what I needed. So that way I could then learn more about myself and grow. And then I could create a support system of actual people that I interacted with, because then I would know what I needed. So first and foremost is be willing to stand alone in your growth, because sometimes you have to, because other people don't understand, and you have to be okay with that piece of it where they don't get it and they come to you and they're like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And say, hey, and stand strong in your belief of why you're doing it, where you're going. And the other piece is finding your foundation. For me, that's my faith in Christ. For other people, it could be their faith, whatever their belief system is. But if you don't have something to stand on, if you don't know what your core foundation is, everything else will not work, because you don't really know what you believe. You don't know how you feel about things. You don't know what is and isn't okay in your world. So you really have to get that set belief. So I had to be willing to stand alone to figure out exactly what my core beliefs were so that I could move forward in the healing process. And so, and that was for me because I didn't have anywhere else I could go. I was a mom with 5 kids, and I was married, and I was a stay-at-home mom and an entrepreneur. I didn't have another environment I could go to change everything. And the help I was getting was done. Like I couldn't go any further with the help that I was receiving, because I was at that point that I had to go internal, kind of in my little cocoon, and just shut down and be like, hey, what about me? And so those would be the 2 main tips, is just be willing to stand alone and set that foundation for yourself, and don't waver from it because of what other people say.
Awesome. Ayomide?
I guess the only thing I'd add to, I honestly don't feel like there's much to add, because the contributors have been so brilliant. I think the only thing I'll just add is getting help is not weakness. Getting help actually is strength. And people think you're weak when you get help, or when you're weak when you, and by getting help, I don't even mean just professional help. It could be as simple as reaching out to someone and saying, I'm struggling, I need help. It takes strength. It takes a lot more strength than people realize. And that's why lots of people don't do it. And a lot of times what I find is those who need it the most are those who reach out the least. So yeah, it takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of coming to terms with, one, knowing that I have a struggle, I have a challenge in this area. And then two, being willing to be vulnerable with someone else, which is, I'm not sure if it's hard, or I'm not even sure which is harder, because both of them are really hard. Facing it in yourself is really hard. Being willing to now let someone else see is also really hard. But yeah, those two things, I would say is something I would say. Know that it's a strength. Know that it takes a lot of strength. And also for people who know people like that, be willing to lend them some of your strength as well. And make it as, well, you can't make it easy for them, but you can make it harder. So try not to make it any harder than it already is.
Yeah. Okay, so last question, and then we can all like wrap up. I want to know if there are people who have social anxiety, if there are people who are shy, if there are introverts listening to this right now, how can each of us like help them? So Ayomide, if there are people that have social anxiety, that have shyness, social anxiety disorder, introversion, is there a way you can help them? For Dena, same thing. For Kristen, same thing. So how would you be able to help them so that they know who they can go to for what?
Well, what I think is interesting, because listening to everyone, I think I actually have a sense for like the different ways we all come in. I think for me, it's mainly helping them come to terms with themselves, helping them come to see themselves and accept themselves, which is always like, so one of the things I like to say is, if you're going to go somewhere, you can only start from where you are. And a lot of times people want, that's a lovely, is that cat? That's a really nice fat cat.
Thank you. She's actually an introvert. She's an introverted feeler with extroverted sensing. Yeah. Sorry about that.
I'm just saying, like, like this rich for. All right, so
she's a cat, so you can't tell her what to do. So
yeah,
sorry,
I know, right?
She's just gonna be here with all of us.
So yeah, I think a lot of times people want to be better than they are, but they want to be better from somewhere other than where they actually are. It's like trying to get to, like, the first thing you do when you check on the map, when you check like Google Maps, is the first thing you have to know is, where am I right now? You don't, like, yes, you need to know where you're going, but you always have to start from, where am I right now? And then you plot the path from where you are to where you're going. But people often, I feel like most people do the equivalent of, you're standing here and then you plot the path from like the next states to where you're going. And then you're wondering where you can't find the landmark that's there, because, so, yeah, so I help people kind of locate themselves. And then from there, kind of figuring out together how to get to where you're going from where you are.
Fantastic. Kristin, how would you be able to help people that are listening today, or that are listening to this?
Yeah, I think that I would be more than happy to help people to understand the 4 types of introversion and the 4 types of extroversion through different online resources, or people are welcome to join my network. I talk about this often, and I would say the easiest way to, much like what everyone else is saying, is self-knowledge, investing in that, and knowing that it's an ongoing, lifelong process. It's not just something that you could do in one day. And yeah, creating that baseline of who you are and where you're most comfortable, and creating your environment and your work around those different things. Everything can relate to that. You can hire a team if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner to take care of those blind spots that you don't enjoy as much, or pick a partner or do things that will cater again to your unique functional stack or personality.
I love that. So you're saying like if you're an entrepreneur, you can pick a team that like complements you. So if you don't particularly like doing something because of your personality type, you can pick a personality type that likes doing that. Like that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. That's what I do in my recruiting agency. And it's funny because when entrepreneurs are hiring, they want to hire people exactly like them. They feel very comfortable. And so they end up hiring a lot of little mini versions of themselves, and then nothing gets done because you don't need a team of entrepreneurs. You need one entrepreneur and then people that prefer different aspects of project management or workflow. So when you feel a little bit uncomfortable or a bit edgy with a candidate, usually you're on the right track, unfortunately. So there's a lot of aspects of the comfort zone, I will say. But then there's some aspects the comfort zone can get you into trouble. So,
yeah. So I know who to go to when I want to hire. So how do people find you? Ayomide and Kristin, how do people find you online? Like, are you on social media? Do you have a website? Ayomide, if people want to talk to you, how do they find you?
Docayomide.com. That's DOCAYOMIDE.com.
And you'll find me on Instagram is good for me. Just Google Kristen J. Bates. I share my MBTI profile right in my Instagram. And my cat that you just saw, she actually has an Instagram too.
Oh, wow.
She's very, very popular. She has over 7,000 followers. It's crazy compared
I thought
to me.
You did say she has more than you have.
That's who you should be following. Yeah, who cares about me? And I'm also on Facebook, and I have a website that I only send out usually to clients, but I think Latanda, you'll be sending that out after, but it's kbatesmbti.com. You can find it there, or just find me on Instagram. Be happy to chat, answer any questions.
Awesome. And it's Chris K.
What's that?
Yeah, I said it's Kristin with a K, not a CH.
That's right, Kristen J. Bates. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
So
also
Dena,
very, very
how would
active on LinkedIn. If anyone's on LinkedIn, I'm very active as I share a lot of really cool jobs and stuff too. So yeah. Find me there.
Awesome. So Dena, how would people, how would you be able to help someone who's like introverted, shy, or that has social anxiety who's listening today? And where can they find you? If they want to connect with Dena, how do they find you?
So the way that I like to help people is I really push the boundaries, and I like to go really deep into their self. And it's sometimes not something people can do on their own. And I like to help them create a support system. So whether that's other mental health professional, getting them in with a mental health professional while we're working together, helping them identify their surroundings and the people in their lives that they can reach out to, and just helping them start that process and work through that. I can definitely do that. People can find me at denaadams.com, or they can find me on Facebook as Dena Adams. They can find me on Instagram as Dena S. Adams. They can find me on LinkedIn the same way. So whichever platform I use Facebook a lot. I'm also on Pinterest, and I share a lot of tips on mental wellness and self-discovery and things there as well.
Okay, so how do you spell the Dena so that they know how to find you?
Yes, it's Dena, and it's Adams.
Okay, awesome. Yes, I focus a lot on introverts. Those are like my ideal clients because for a number of reasons, but yeah. and it's social skills. So if you find that you've been in a situation where you don't have social skills, or you want to network more and social more, I'm the person to come to help you with that. Making people introverts, it's what everybody has said. I take you from where you are, having you be comfortable in being an introvert, but work. I'm not trying to change you and make you an extrovert. Yeah, because I'm not an extrovert. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. This was really nice. And yeah, I forgot to say, you can find me at SkillsTribe. So like to learn a skill, SKILLS plural, and tribe, like a tribe of people, SkillsTribe.com. I'm also at SkillsTribe on Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram right now. So yeah. Yes, so Dena, Kristin, Ayomide, thank you so much for coming here. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for letting us understand what introversion is, shyness is, social anxiety. Thank you so much for this. And just as a quick recap, I feel like introversion is, based on what everybody has said today, it's like people that get energy from solitude or being by themselves, right? And then they sort of lose energy when they're social and around people, right? Like, and then for extroverts, it's kind of the opposite, right? Right. Right? Anybody?
Yeah,
I
you're
think
on
that's
the
a
right
good
track.
summary.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. So thank you so much for being here. If you're listening, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for staying to the end. I look forward to having more of these interviews. Hopefully, I'll be able to interview each and every one of you, like on your own, on Instagram or something. So this was so nice. Thank you so much for agreeing to be here. This was so much fun.
So awesome to meet you guys. This was great. Anytime. I love talking about